Hi, everyone. Now we're going to look at the effects of an increase or decrease in supply. We're going to look at it graphically, just like we did it for demand. And again, supply can only increase or decrease, and it'll cause a shortage or a surplus. And we already know what happens to price when there's a shortage or surplus. So some of this will be a review, but other of it will be a little bit new. So let's take a look. So we can take off from our last section where we looked at what caused the shifters. And now basically we're just going to say here which way supply shifts and what the results are. So let's take a peek here. The slide's all in one here. So I'm just going to highlight the important parts. Here's S1. So this is where we're starting. And I won't highlight the brown demand curve because it doesn't change. So we start at this point and we find out we're in equilibrium. So PE1 is 20 and our quantity we're in equilibrium is QE1 is 14. So we sit there, we start in equilibrium, and for some reason the supply shifts to the right. Remember, there were 6 large categories that could shift supply. I'm just going to say, hey, the price of a productive resource fell. For example, I'm making wine and the price of grapes fell. So lucky me, I can supply more wine. But don't use that example in an exam because it's too common and too boring, and I used it anyway. So the first thing we note is that this supply curve, I'll change colors to blue. This supply curve shifted to the right, an increase in supply to S2. Okay, so we have to think what happens initially. Right away, before the price has an opportunity to change, we create, in your mind, would that be a surplus or a shortage? So right at the original price of 20, the equilibrium price, we see a huge increase in supply for whatever reason. And initially, is there a surplus or a shortage? And the answer is, of course, that's a surplus because producers now are willing to produce so much more at that going price. So we already know the answer from here on. If there's a surplus, which way does price go? Up or down? And of course, it goes down, and we end up finding our new intersection with our second supply curve and, of course, our original demand curve, because that hasn't changed. We go across, we find out we've got a lower equilibrium price, PE2, and we've got a higher equilibrium quantity, QE2. And that should make sense. A big increase in supply causes a surplus. It brings the equilibrium price down, and it brings the equilibrium quantity up. There'll be more exchanged. Okay, so let's take a look at the market adjustments to a decrease in supply. So that could happen, say, if there's an increase in the price of productive resources, so an increase in the price of inputs, or maybe just firms happen to leave the industry for some reason or another. But we start the same old way as always, the equilibrium price first, right there, where supply 1 crosses demand, gives us a price of 20 and an equilibrium quantity of 14. That's our equilibrium. Then there's the sudden shift downward of supply. So I won't trace the new S2 curve, but there it is. What we have to look at is that when that supply shifts immediately to the left or decreases at the original price, so the supply shifts from here straight to the left, we've got this gap here. Is that a shortage or a surplus? So you ask in your mind, well, supply shifts to the left, it decreases. Well, very, like 100% sure it's causing a shortage. Supply decreases. So there's a shortage that's caused right away. I won't draw it in here, but you should be able to label the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. And when there's a shortage, price increases. Just ask yourself, if there's not enough product around, is price likely to go up or down? Up, price increases. And then we just find our new equilibrium, the intersection of S2 and the original demand curve. We go across to find our price. This is our new PE2, and come down to find our new quantity, QE2. So we've seen a reduction in supply, causes a shortage, causes the price go up, and the equilibrium quantity falls off. When you're doing questions, you have to make sure that you indicate all of these things that are going on. So there we have it. Remember, supply can only shift two ways. It can be increased to the right or decreased to the left. That's it for this chapter pretty much. I'm going to do one example on the next couple pages here. Only this example we're going to do is in a table instead of graphically, but no big deal. It's the same way of thinking of things, and graphs demand and supply cross where quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal. In a table, you just go down the quantity demanded until you find where it equals the quantity supplied, and that's right there. And the equilibrium price is 5, and then the equilibrium quantity is 100. Let's just click ahead. Yep, 5 and 100. Now it says, suppose supply increases by 50%. What are the new equilibrium price and quantities? Let's take a look at that. Supply is 60 right here. 50% of 60 is 30, so we add 30 to get 90. Supply is 70. 50% of 70 is 35. So we add that to give us 105. 120 here, 50% of 120 is 60. So we add that to get 180. So let's just click ahead and see the points. There it is. So these numbers, supply 2, add up by just taking 50% of supply 1 and adding it to it. What are the new equilibrium price and quantity? Well, we find it the same way. We literally go down till we find where the old quantity demandeds, they're right here, where that would equal quantity supplied, and we find that's right there. Here we've got 120, quantity supplied equals 120, quantity demanded, I'll just put a big equal sign there, and that happens at a price of 450. New quantity supplied to the old quantity demanded, find where they equal, and that's the new equilibrium price. And just make sure this makes sense to you, that supply increased and price went down and equilibrium quantity went up a little bit. So there's one more slide that we'll cover when we hit it in class, and it's this one. We're going to look at specific markets and find out what effect the following have on the supply price and quantity traded of wine. We'll cover that one in class, and we'll see you when we get there.